Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Alumni Convocation. First, I want to acknowledge our returning alumni. Welcome back to Bryn Mawr. Each spring, we invite one or more of our Alumni Award winners to speak to current students and our alumni community at this Alumni Weekend Convocation. The Alumni Association confers 4 alumni awards annually: the Young, Senior, and Distinguished Alumni Awards, and the Ann Edmonds Croker Class of '58 Alumni Service Award, which is a surprise to the recipient. Today, I am really pleased to be able to welcome Rebecca Robinson, Class of 2017, and Hillary Hart-Falk, Class of 1997, the winners of the Young and Distinguished Alumni Awards, to present today's convocation. Unfortunately, Judy Temkin Irvine, Class of 1962, who is the winner of this year's Senior Alumna Award, is unable to join us due to a previous commitment. Joining our Alumni Award winners are 2 current students, Devin and Shreya, who will moderate the conversation. And now I'm going to turn it over to them and let them take it away.
The Young Alumni Award is given to an alumna who has graduated within the last 20 years, who has distinguished herself in the community or in her profession. Rebecca Robinson, Class of 17, is a trilingual multimedia journalist and MS journalism candidate at Columbia University. A 2017 graduate of Bryn Mawr, she received her BA in History and Russian Language and Literature and Practical French from the University of Toronto. While at the University of Toronto, Rebecca received the 2021 University of Toronto Student Leadership Award for demonstrating outstanding commitment and service while having a lasting impact on her peers in the university. A podcast producer, Rebecca works to uplift marginalized voices and has produced projects around the LGBTQ identities in Eastern Europe and the Slavic diaspora, as well as highlighting the impressive work of Black student content creators in Toronto. Earlier this year, Rebecca was nominated for Good Morning America's 2022 Inspiration List for making Black history right now as a part of her role on GLSEN's board of directors.
The Distinguished Alumna Award is given to an alumna who embodies the highest ideal of the school through her professional or volunteer commitments. Leadership, a humanistic spirit, creativity, and community involvement and professional achievement are among the qualities to be considered. Hillary Hart-Falk, Class of 1997, is president and a CEO of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, leading the largest national nonprofit conservation organization dedicated solely to preserving, protecting, and restoring the Chesapeake Bay. She is a proven expert in large-scale ecosystem restoration and leading organizational change. Hillary's national conservation leadership includes several executive roles at the National Wildlife Federation, culminating in Chief Program Officer. While at NWF, she created and directed the Choose Clean Water Coalition, led programs including wildlife conservation, coastal resiliency, water policy, greenhouse gas reduction, and environmental education. Throughout her career, Hillary has championed women's leadership and advancing equity in the conservation movement. She was a fellow with the International Women's Forum and co-chaired the National Wildlife Federation's Women in Conservation Leadership Advisory Council. We're so excited that both Rebecca and Hillary are able to join us today.
So our first question is, what is your favorite Bryn Mawr memory and what was your favorite organization you were a part of?
Do you want to get started, Hillary?
You can get started.
Okay, I'll start. I was thinking about this on the train ride down from New York this morning, and I'd have to say in 2015, I was on the softball team, and we won the championship that year for the conference. And it was super exciting because I don't remember, like, in my time, like, ever having been a part of, like, a championship team. And I think in that moment, we were also undefeated, and we were just so excited to just, like, have that moment on the field, and you could just, like, feel the excitement in the stands from everybody around us. And it was just such a great memory because I had such great feelings for my teammates in that year. And I think I love team sports for that very reason, because of that exact moment that you have when you all succeed together. And you asked, what was the second part of your question?
the favorite organization or just your favorite Bryn Mawr memory?
Oh, okay, yeah, no, I'll stick with that part.
I was thinking about this also on the way here today, and one thing that sticks out was running for senior class president. And that year, Jen Coughlin and I were neck and neck during that. And we had 3 runoffs and ended up tying every single time. And so for the first time, maybe ever, we had we were shared senior class presidents of the class of 1997. Oh, there we go. Okay, so not precedent setting. So Jen and I ended up throughout that year sharing the job. And it was a wonderful experience, learning from Jen, trying to lead together, certainly a good class in shared leadership, and just a wonderful experience that whole year working with her.
We were kind of wondering, for everyone in the audience, when did you come to Bryn Mawr, and what was like your path through Bryn Mawr? Like what classes, disciplines, what were you interested or involved in?
Sure, I can get started. I came to Bryn Mawr starting in the 2nd grade, so I started in the lower school and I made my way up. It's really interesting to see some of the senior class members here because I feel like I've seen some of your faces over the last couple of years too, which is really cool to see you now in this space. And the classes that I took, I loved my language classes. As you probably heard in my bio, I continued to study languages throughout college. And I think it provided me an excellent experience studying abroad and just learning that part of myself through learning about other people's cultures and putting myself in that moment where maybe I might feel a little bit of discomfort, but that's how you learn more about yourself at the end of the day. And it inspired me so much that I ended up moving to Canada, and I just wanted to keep pursuing languages and putting myself in those situations where I could constantly challenge myself to learn the best person that I could be essentially at the end of the day. So yeah.
And I was terrible at languages, but I did start at Bryn Mawr in 1st grade and was here through all 12 years and enjoyed a lot of different things. I knew from a very young age that I wanted to work on conservation, environmental issues, and so I knew that it was important to focus on science. But I think the one thing that I learned and had the benefit of my entire experience at Bryn Mawr was leadership development, and that started actually in sort of lower school, and opportunities in middle school and high school, and I think that those leadership experiences early on were really important in addition to classwork and playing sports, which I absolutely loved. But I'll point out that leadership development starts really early, and I think everybody who has had the benefit of that knows that is critical to success later on in life.
Another question is, what is the time that you took a risk at Bryn Mawr, and what was the result?
I'm gonna have you start with that one while I think about that.
Oh gosh. I mean, I think one of the great things about Bryn Mawr generally is that is ingrained, whether that's taking a risk and trying out for a team. So I can think of several examples of that: lacrosse and field hockey, trying out for a play, which I did early on. My husband's here today, and I told him I remember doing The Wizard of Oz on the stage, and he was really floored by that because I'm not very theatrical. But I, just those experiences, and I do think that over and over again, Bryn Mawr creates opportunities to take risk. Maybe they don't, and I think also in a really safe environment. So lots of examples throughout 12 years.
100%. I think another huge risk is burying yourself on stage during senior convocation. I remember my senior speech, I wrote an open letter to myself in 9th grade because I really couldn't figure out how to write a speech. And I was like, well, I know how to write a journal article, so I'm just gonna write a little diary entry and turn that into my senior speech. And I don't know, it was just a huge risk because I was sharing a part of myself, really deeply a part of myself in front of a lot of people. And that's pretty hard to do, especially when you're 17, 18, getting up on a stage in front of a lot of people. So, but it's a great experience, and honestly, I think that helped me prepare for other public speaking opportunities that came down the line. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
Well, and I was actually just thinking about that too, not just giving convocation, but preparing for it and having to practice. Exactly. Public speaking and slowing down and all of those, all the aspects of
those keys are still going on my head right now as I recognize that I speak way too quickly most of the time, so I'm trying to.
Something that we've talked about this year, especially in relationship to the work that Cafe has been doing in our community, which is community advocacy for equity. I got it. Okay. How has engaging across differences, which has been one of their big themes this year, helped you grow, whether that's at Bryn Mawr or whether that's in your professional career?
Yeah, I mean, in journalism, one of the things that we're constantly pushing ourselves to do is, reach out to as many diverse people as possible in order to get as many sides of the story as possible and not go directly for that advocacy angle that we might feel inclined to do right off the bat. And so I think that it's been a challenge for sure, because there's the thing about journalism, you're not always covering a story that you have a lot of familiarity with, so you have to rely on the people that you're speaking to. So I would say that I challenge myself to talk to and engage with as many people as possible. And living in New York, you get a chance to talk to a lot of really interesting and diverse people. So it's been a pleasure to do that, but it's also really, really hard, because you have to challenge your own bias in a way, because you kind of tend to navigate to talking towards certain people, and you have to really push yourself out of that comfort zone in order to get the story the way that you need to.
Yeah, and I'll add, professionally in the environment and conservation space, there's been a lot of need to address equity and justice in our work. And years ago at National Wildlife Federation, I was looking around me and everybody looked like me, and most of them were men, and trying to figure out how to support representation, equity in our work, support and mentor especially young women of color in the field, so that we could even have the opportunity to get different perspectives in the room, and advocating for that. And then also, to Rekwa's point, looking at conservation and environmental issues not through my own lens, but looking at the communities that we were serving and making sure that those community voices were heard and they were supported. And at the time, just the just huge challenges of doing that across a very large organization, doing that within a community that was really grappling with some of those issues, but trying every day to figure out new ways of exploring equity in the environment and what that meant for the organizational change and the changes that we needed to make in how we promoted staff to pay equity, and then out in the world as we were working with communities and making sure that their needs were centered in the work that we were doing.
Since you both have experienced Bryn Mawr's curriculum, how has intellectual curiosity played into your life and in your career?
I mean, I kind of talked a little bit about that just a moment ago, where you're not always covering a topic that you're super familiar with, and in some ways that's even better when you're pursuing a story, because you can ask a lot of really curious questions. If you have a deep knowledge, sometimes certain things might slip by, you might not consider them as strongly, but your audience might not be as familiar with that. So leaning into that curiosity and asking, sometimes the stupid question, I had to do an interview the other day, what is cryptocurrency? Can you explain how that works, Because for some people, they just might not know, and it's important to have that context as well. So I think asking really curious questions is important.
Yeah, and I'll add, in the environmental and conservation and world of climate change can get people pretty frustrated really quickly, and sometimes be just, it's just a huge challenge in every direction. And one thing that I've really relied on is to encourage, especially I think individuals who've been in the community for a really long time and are feeling just frustrated. Why haven't we made more progress on water quality? Why aren't we doing? Is that if we can take away some of that frustration and anger and just get really curious about the answers to these really difficult questions, I think we're going to get a lot better answers. And I work on Chesapeake Bay issues now every day, and I think there are a lot of people who really wanted the movement, wanted the bay to be clean by now. And so we get a lot of why can't we do this? And again, I think just if we can focus on positive outcomes, curiosity, and a little bit of optimism, I think we're going to get to much better answers. And also, I think one of the other parts about curiosity and asking questions is also looking at what's worked before and trying to replicate that success, and also acknowledge when failure, and looking at places where at a community scale or an organizational scale where we've failed, and to not make that sort of bad, but to actually highlight failure and then be able to actually pivot from that and learn, really important lessons from failure.
Kind of pivoting slightly, imagining yourself in 3 different places, as a freshman who's entering high school, as a senior who's about to graduate, or as a young alum, what would your advice be to any of those 3 people, or all of them, whatever you feel like answering?
I mean, sleep is definitely essential, like all the time. So I think that at Bryn Mawr, sometimes we like to play this like Olympics game, like, oh, how much sleep did you get last night studying for that test? Like, not a lot. That's not good. Like, you need to sleep. So, and your brain needs that, especially as you like move beyond Bryn Mawr, like into your job and things like that elsewhere. So if I could tell myself, especially senior year, like, hey, like sleep, super essential, make sure you get that because, we want to keep moving, we want to keep going. I also started freshman year on crutches, so, I mean, I just say keep moving, you know what I mean? Like at some point, you maybe want to like stand still and like, when I'm thinking about this in my head, I mean like, just keep pushing forward, right? So there's going to be moments where you're going to have those setbacks, but like as long as you keep pushing and you keep walking, even if it's on crutches, then like, you'll get to where you're trying to go.
I was thinking about being a senior and applying for senior project and ending up at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation with my senior project. And at the time, I thought that would just be a really incredible internship and way to spend senior year, and it was. It was a wonderful opportunity. And then, leading to a job after college, also where I met my husband. So that first experience out in the world through Bryn Mawr at an organization that I was really passionate about, and not knowing where my career would go, but I think I would, encourage myself at the time just to keep going. I mean, just that one really cool opportunity will lead to the next opportunity. And I don't think I ever thought I would be back where I am today, leading the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. But I do think that those opportunities that you get early on, and not knowing exactly how it's all going to work out is fine, but just building on taking that one opportunity and trusting yourself to know what's next, but not having to worry about every single step.
I mean, I'd also like to add, like trusting those opportunities, because I feel like there's a lot of moments, at least in my life, that I can say like, oh, I had this one conversation with this person that led to another conversation, which led to another opportunity. So I'd also like to add, like, talk to the people around you, like really, truly deeply, and also talk to your teachers, because they can also really help, push and guide you and like help make connections in other ways as well. And that becomes even more important after Bryn Mawr, as well as you like enter, networking spaces. Just constantly talk to the people who might have a little bit more experience than you, because they can definitely help guide you in the direction that you want to end up going to.
So at Bryn Mawr, we really like to apply our community norms and just core values into our everyday. So what are some Bryn Mawr values that you still live by in the present day?
I mean, I love the saying, like, bold voices. I don't remember the exact motto that we had before. It was like, exceptional foundation, remarkable life. But that whole bold voices thing constantly echoes in my head, because whether I'm like at the board table with Glisten, or if I'm out on the street interviewing strangers, in Midtown for my story, you have to be like willing and ready to like talk to any and everybody, and like that's how you make connections at the end of the day, and that's how you get to where you're trying to go. So I love bold voices. I'm gonna use that forever, and like it's constantly on my mind.
Yeah, I was also just thinking about a consequential life and what that means to everybody, and I think no matter whether you end up in the corporate world and working for a business, or you work for a nonprofit, if you work in the government, I think just thinking about what does it mean to live a consequential life, and how can you bring that to those really fun moments in life, and also the less fun moments of life, and the challenges professionally, and also just this, I don't know if it's always so clear when you're here, but celebration of thought, celebration of difference, and being able to articulate your own ideals, even, again, when it's difficult and when you're up against something. I think that is a huge life lesson, and one that, we are all really fortunate to get to have.
So one thing that we were kind of wondering about was, your fields are both pretty different, but what are some ways that your fields are changing the world that we might not know about or might not have been exposed to in our classes?
Well, it's such a tough question. I mean, I'm still very new to journalism. Like, I'm finishing my master's program, but even in like the short time that I've been working in that field, I think it's something that journalism is kind of hidden in the background. We don't really pay attention to it as much, but it really dictates a lot of, the stories that we talk about in our day-to-day. And I think when I think about what's happening right now over in Russia and Ukraine, just like the incredible work that journalists are doing over there on the ground and like still trying to share that information, like that is really inspiring to me, and that's definitely the kind of work that I'd like to work towards, because you're helping your community, you're helping the people around you, and I think that's the beauty and the power of journalism. Now, whether or not that's groundbreaking and changing what you were just saying, I don't think so, but I think that it's still important regardless.
One of the interesting moments right now in the environmental and conservation world is that a lot of the goals that were established or are established right now are all being challenged by climate change. And so there's been, for the last probably 50 years, there's always been a look back. When are we going back to a place where there's clean water, or back to a more, increased public lands or something in the past? And this climate change has really forced everybody to grapple with the fact that we're just not going back. But that the future doesn't have to be pessimistic. The future can actually be really optimistic if we look at making sure that environmental benefits are also improving people's lives. And I think the future is exciting, but it's also just talking about the fact that we're not going back to a place and that we're going forward, I think is really creating some interesting conversations in the community, because we have to look at the goals of the future and where we're headed. And climate change has forced us all to really reckon with a lot of the things that we thought were ideals or goals that were attainable. And so it's been a fascinating conversation, and I think it will continue as we continue to manage for change, and that change is something that is going to just be a defining feature of the future of environmentalism.
And even though our fields might be very different, every story at this point in 2022 is a climate story. So like there's some climate angle to like every story we're pursuing, so they're not that far off.
Kind of branching off of the different types of fields that you guys have, what advice would you give us students that are trying to get into your fields, and what resources and opportunities were you able to take in order to achieve these?
Would you like to get started?
Sure. So I would say internships, fellowships. I think the environmental conservation movement has gotten a lot better in understanding that those opportunities are the way into the field, and also need to be paid well, or well for nonprofit, well for nonprofit salaries. Sorry, everybody. And that those early opportunities are a great way to get started. I also love talking to young people, whether just out of high school or college, about what they're passionate about, and trying to help in any way possible through mentorships or just connecting dots. The environmental and conservation communities are pretty small sometimes, and so I'd love to help anybody who's interested in whether it's climate change or clean water or wildlife. There are plenty of issues, and I think looking at environmental justice and nature access for all are also big issues, and so we need all the help we can get on all of those issues, and especially climate change, whether that's stopping the carbon in the atmosphere, or whether that's addressing the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. It's a great field, and there are many opportunities to make a difference.
I'd say for journalism, I actually had no intention of pursuing journalism before I entered graduate school, but I realized that the things that I want to do, which is to travel and to talk to people and like have conversations, journalism is a great way to get into that space and to be able to do that professionally, because I've just had so many fascinating conversations listening to people and their stories, and trying to find a way to create my own storytelling at the end of the day too. For someone who's interested in pursuing journalism, I would say reaching out to some of your favorite writers or authors or speakers and actually complimenting their work and telling them, what did you like about it? Because that kind of gets you noticed too. People love to hear compliments about their work, and sometimes, as I've learned in radio, like not everyone listens to your story. So if somebody actually does listen and takes the time to acknowledge the work and the effort that you put into that, feels really good at the end of the day. And I'd also say just, journalism is all about like networking and connections and things like that too. So if you just get a chance to like have a conversation with anybody, you never know who else might be listening or who else could help share, that information for you as well. There's a bunch of internships out there as well, but like for journalism, sometimes it could be a little bit difficult, especially coming right out of high school. But if you can start your own thing, people really like they're really into that as well. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, starting your own blog, like that's good fuel for the future as well, because it helps get that creative juices flowing in your head.
Something I was kind of interested in was like, how has the pandemic shifted the way in which you work or your field, the way your field is working? Because for many of us, that was like remote learning or hybrid learning. So, but what kind of impact has it had on your day-to-day or like overall field?
It was really hard for me coming out of, quarantine. I was living in Toronto during like the height of the pandemic, and they had some of the strictest lockdowns in North America. So we were really hunkered down for quite a while. And then I moved to New York and everything was open and people are in the street, and like, it was kind of whiplash almost at that point. But it's like learning to get back into the habit of like walking down the street and like actually talking to people, which I think we kind of got away from obviously during the pandemic with like social distancing. So it's like retraining your brain to like, okay, I can take my own safety precautions in a way, but at the end of the day, I still love talking to people, and like that's what I'm out here trying to do. And so that it's kind of how it's shifted. We still do like remote reporting as well, where we'll do Zoom interviews, but sometimes the best tape, especially when you're an audio reporter, like the audio storytelling, is when you get to go in person, because you can actually get the full scene and like the soundscape of this place that you're in.
When the pandemic started, I was at National Wildlife Federation, which is an organization of about 375, 400 staff across the country, and it was like for everybody, it was just hugely disruptive. And so overnight, we made sure that 400 staff could go home with the laptop, be set up for work. And it was a masterclass in disruption and how to lead through disruption. And we were trying to get, support the team. And I've just fully appreciated over the last several years the importance of mental health resources for people, especially individuals with young kids who were at home trying to do work, and also trying to keep kids focused on e-learning. I was also in that category, trying to work and have kids with e-learning, along with my husband and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, getting all of our kids through the last couple of years. But I think one of the interesting things about the pandemic was also about what it proved to all of us, which is that we could work from home, that we could create a lot more flexible workplaces, that we needed to increase our mental health benefits, because mental health is health. And I think we're going to look back at the last couple of years and see just fundamentally a portal between the past and the future of work. And I also think that there is, while we're not going back to a pandemic anytime soon, I do think that the things that we've learned through that time, all the disruption, has created massive opportunities about understanding new norms for work. And I think the next couple of years are going to be really interesting in how do we make sure everybody feels supported and has what they need, trying to address the trauma of the last 2 years, but also looking at all these great opportunities to change work that works more for people, because I think we all recognize that work didn't really work for people before the pandemic very well. And so how can we learn from all of that and create better workplaces for the future?
Thank you both so much. We're going to turn it over to a couple of audience questions. Do we have time for? Maybe one quick question. Okay, one question from the audience.
I would say it definitely made me more confident. I was telling some students during lunch, like going to the University of Toronto, it's a huge public university, like research university. And my first lecture was 500 people. And so that's like larger the entire upper school, right? And that's just one class. So when you have to like speak up in class, like having that confidence and knowing that like you have an opinion and you're willing and you're ready to share it, like Bryn Mawr really prepared me for that. And I think that happened like being in this kind of environment.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'd add too that, I feel so lucky to be up on stage right now, especially with Rebecca. But I just think about like my classmates and all of the incredible work that they're doing, and knowing that those women were my friends, several of them since first grade, and that the experience of being surrounded in a very loving environment with some of the smartest people I've ever met. Made a huge impact, and I think confidence is one of those things. I now know if I'm in a meeting and being surrounded by people, I feel pretty good. You guys are just the most incredible, smartest, thoughtful individuals, and I think being surrounded by that for my whole childhood made a huge impact on me. And I definitely give Bryn Mawr a lot of credit for that. So thank you for the question.
Okay, you all are dismissed. Thank you.